I'm going to show how I do the synthetic skin for my octopus here this time around. Talked about it in prior videos, mentioned there's something called Ugu. It's a DIY form of Sugru, I think it was originally. Essentially, it's type 1 clear silicone caulk. It's mixed in with cornstarch, and if you want any coloration, use some oil paints from a tube is what I'm doing. So essentially what I do, I start out by putting a layer of cornstarch on a piece of wax paper. I take my silicone, squirt out a big old blob of it out here, and I mean a big blob of this stuff here. You have to kind of get a feel for how quick it dries and how to mix your color to keep some consistency. At the start I had some problems with figuring that out. That's why it's a learning process a lot of times. So essentially there I've got, let's get this thing off here so it doesn't trail everywhere. I've got some silicone out there. I know about the rough amount of, I'm using like ultramarine blue here for the color on my octopus. Squeeze out a certain amount of it there. Again, that's an experimentation type thing depending on what you want. And then what I do after I've done that, I shoot another batch of this silicone over the top to cover up the oil paint, because I'm going to mix it up here in a little bit, and I just don't want the oil paint getting all over my gloves instead of being mixed into the material. Now let's get that little bit off the end there. So then what I do after that is I take my cornstarch, kind of put some over the top of it so that it doesn't stick to my gloves. I get my gloves coated up a little bit with this stuff. Then I just kind of grab it carefully and start kind of bouncing it around, working it back and forth, and I have to constantly keep putting this cornstarch on it. So what'll happen is I have to mix this around. This takes about, at least 10 minutes of mixing probably, back and forth. A lot of times I'll do, once it gets to a certain point, I can start folding it over, which mixes the paint up a lot faster. Right now it's too sticky, so I just kind of have to work it slow to get the silicone in there, or silicone, get the cornstarch into the silicone, and after that, then again I can start just folding it like you would if you were doing some bread dough or something like that. So essentially, you have to kind of get a feel for how far to push this thing before how far to knead it before it's ready to start working with. And I've got a pretty good idea on the feeling on it. When I go to pull it apart, I usually break it into smaller chunks from this big ball that I start with. Once I can see that the stringiness on it is substantially less, then I'll break it up into smaller chunks, and I'll start applying it a little bit at a time. You have to work fast at that stage because it turns pretty quick to the point where you won't either, doesn't stick very well anymore, or it won't take in my case, the texturing that I put on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this video, and then when I've got this all done, I'm going to, when it's ready, I'll start the video again, show kind of me putting some of it on here on the sculpture. So hang on. Okay, now that I'm covered with cornstarch, my camera is covered with cornstarch, I'm right about the point where I can show what this kind of looks like here. There's still cornstarch on it, but you can see the generalized pliability of it there. I just kind of keep tapping it with that. It's getting right to the point where it's going to be workable to work with. You can see it's got a little bit of stretchiness to it. Still a little sticky. And I'll just kind of start working it into the parts over here. I probably won't demonstrate that because it goes pretty quick and I don't have enough time here to run the camera and move it around before this stuff starts setting up. So I'll kind of, you can look down here though and see a web. There's part of a webbing between the arms on my octopus. I'm going to put this stuff in there on it. Generally what I do is I just kind of flatten it out a certain degree and see if it sticks too much to my hand. If it doesn't, or my glove, if it doesn't, then I just kind of take that, lay that over the top of it, of what I'm going to work it into, and then I just kind of slowly start working it into that surface. I'll put on the top a little bit of cornstarch constantly as I'm working this into there, and then I'll put a texture on with a texture roller that I have. I may show that here after a bit. I'm going to pause this now as I put this on because it's time sensitive. End of the day, here's where I'm at. I've got a bunch of the webbing in place. In fact, all the webbing in between the arms. I still have to hook up the wires in here that feed each one of the pendant lights. And I'll have to cover this back up. I got a little hole drilled in here where I'll feed that main line up to get the electricity into the pendants. And the bottom side is pretty much there. I've got it flipped over upside down right now. I still got some work to do on the mantle. You see it's still covered with cornstarch, so it's going to change what it looks like a little bit. The cornstarch actually makes it kind of look nice. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to do a equivalent to some kind of glaze with an oil paint that might still provide something like that. Can't do a color wash because that's like a watercolor thing or an acrylic thing that you can do it with, but it wouldn't work here for this. So I'll see if glaze works on this. Anyway, I'll tackle this again at a later point in time. That's where I'm at now.